Welcome to part 3 of my advanced infantry guide. We are finally done with all of the boring theoretical stuff. I promise I'm not going to bore you guys anymore. And first things first is settings. For FOV, it is pretty much preference. I prefer to play on 105. I know people that play on 90. I know that people play on 120. I would stick to right around the 100 area because when you get too narrow at 90, you can't see much around you. But if you get to 120, you get a fishbowl effect. The reason people do play on 120 FOV is because it gives the appearance of less recoil. It's not actually giving you less recoil, but it just looks that way. I would recommend sweet spot, perfect spot at 100, and then you can personalize it from there. Make sure you disable the weapon model blur, just so whenever you're hip firing and moving your gun around really quickly, it's a solid image so you know exactly where it is and it doesn't blur and get all shaky. For sensitivity, I play on 800 DPI on my mouse, which is I would say that is a good starting spot. As far as the in-game sensitivity goes, it is personalized. I play on 0.2. Squad is not a fast-paced shooter like Call of Duty, so there's no reason to be able to spin around super fast. You want your sensitivity pretty low, because whenever you're engaging enemies out to 200, 300 meters, you want to be able to smoothly aim onto them. Steady aim sensitivity is pretty much personal preference. That's whenever you're holding shift and holding your breath, or how much do you want your cursor or aim to slow down when you're holding your breath. Again, all the sensitivity multipliers, they're all personal preference. Play around with them, see what you like. These are mine if you want to copy them. Here are my movement settings. I use hold for everything. The only thing I don't use hold for is crouch. Now, getting into graphic settings, these are super important. Squad is not a very well optimized game, so some of these settings will help you guys get better FPS. Starting out with your FPS in game, just set it to whatever your refresh rate is on your monitor. There's no reason to go any higher because, well, your monitor can't even put it out, so there's no point in trying to put that much stress on your computer. For your renderer, please use DirectX 11. DirectX 12 is broken and it causes a lot of frame issues. So if you are using 12, swap it to 11. I guarantee you get 20 frames. Now for scopes, we want to prioritize that clarity in scopes. The resolution scale, I rock 100. And again, I cap that FPS at 120 instead of unlimited. It also helps if you experience any type of lag when you aim into your scope. If you cap that FPS to something that your computer can hit, it'll help reduce that kind of jittery motion when you try and scope in. For anti-aliasing, I wouldn't go anywhere over medium. You can go higher in the quality if you would like, if your computer can handle it, but the AA samples do not go over 4. It can create ghosting inside of the game and creates objects in jagged corners that aren't actually there. I don't use any super sampling or any upscaling. For view distance, you want this at high. The only time you'd ever want to throw it on epic is if you are an armor player trying to shoot something 2,000, 3,000 meters out. And honestly, if you are struggling for some performance, you can gain a couple frames by dropping that down to medium. As an infantry player, you won't ever need the extra distance that it gives you. For shaders, we're always going to run low. The actual low, medium, high, or epic for textures doesn't really matter. I would run it at low or medium if your computer can handle it. There's no real reason to go to high or epic. The real thing you want here is the anisotropic filtering. You want to have that at least 16 samples at all times. If you're getting frame stutters or less frames, drop down your actual texture quality. So for example, if you're running it at high, drop it down to medium. Or if you're running at medium, drop it down to low. The reason you don't want to sacrifice any of the anisotropic filtering samples and you want to keep them at 16 is because that helps create more sharper images. So if you're trying to shoot somebody from, say, 200 meters out and they're trying to peek you, whenever their shoulder or helmet is barely sticking out, it'll create a much sharper image and be very clear and easier to shoot. Shadows are always going to be at low. Ambient occlusion is always going to be at low. You want to run your particles as high as possible. I run mine at epic. I would say start off at epic or high. And if you experience any frame drops during mortar barrages or artillery, or if a tank is shooting next to you or an LAV or anything like that, then drop it down there. The reason you want to run them super high is because of muzzle flashes. Now, especially if you're playing in a very wooded area, like say Goose Bay or Gordok or Yurivka, you want to be able to pick out those muzzle flashes from the enemy, and running the particles as high as possible makes that super easy. Ocean is always going to be low. Make sure you turn off wake simulation. Post-processing quality, always going to be at low. Make sure you turn off lens flares and turn that motion blur all the way down. Screen sharpening at 0.5. And then color grading. Color grading is important. You want to run your brightness as high as possible, turn your contrast all the way down, and run that saturation all the way up. It'll help the enemies pop, and especially when they're moving around, you'll be able to see and pick out enemies a little bit easier. Last thing is make sure you turn your audio quality to epic and turn your effects to about 150, or depending on how comfortable you are, just to help you hear footsteps and gunshots and pretty much everything in the game better. Let's talk about when to give up off of a hab versus a rally. And yes, they are different, and I'll explain rally in a second. Whenever you're playing off a hab, it is your own personal respawn timer. So if you were to die, you're automatically set on your respawn timer as soon as you are incapacitated. Let's say you are this blue 4 guy right here. If you were to die right here, you would obviously not want to give up because, well, you have teammates around you and you have a medic behind you. So you would like to see if they can refrag you and pick you back up. The friendlies around you were to die and you die right after them, you'd still not want to give up because you have a medic around you and you still have 3 teammates to your south that would be able to possibly crossfire and allow your medic to pick you up. You would also want to be listening to footsteps to relay that information to your medic. After about 40 seconds, and especially if you're dead in a unsafe spot, you would then want to be able to reset and respawn and refill your hole just to maintain tempo and momentum of your lane. So now let's say this situation arises where it's only 3 of your squad mates, including you, alive. If you're this north guy here and you were to die in this situation with the entire enemy squad alive, you would almost want to be giving up right at that 40-second mark. Again, we never want to give up before that 40 seconds when you're spawning off a hab, because it doesn't matter when you die, as soon as you are incapacitated, that timer starts. Now I placed the hab with a rally, and let's talk about the difference. So as explained in previous videos, and all of you should know, whenever you're playing off a rally, it is a constant respawn wave. And so whenever you die, you could respawn within 20 seconds, 30 seconds, 40 seconds, 60 or even 70 seconds sometimes. So you always want to be keeping track of whenever your rally quote unquote pops, or its respawn wave refreshes and respawns your squad. And by doing so, you just type in your squad chat XX and whatever number in game that the rally is respawning. Because also right now in the current state of squad, some servers and spawn timers are off, and so that lets you and your squad mates know when the rally is refreshing. And it does not matter whenever you die, the quickest you can spawn is in 20 seconds. Because if you were to die within 15 seconds of the respawn wave for the rally, you still have to wait for a completely new refresh. So let's go back to the same situation, and if you are this blue 4 guy now, and you die here, but you are respawning and playing off a rally, and you know that your rally is going to refresh within 25 seconds, that means you know that you can hit that rally wave, and you're going to want to give up about 10 seconds before that rally pops. So keeping track of whenever your rally resets and respawns your squad is a really good way to be able to keep up tempo in your lane, and it also forces you to be synced up with your squad. On to peeking. In squad, all characters are right-handed. So take for example, if you're shooting a gun in real life from your right side, it is much easier to lean over and peek around a corner leaning to the right rather than leaning across your body to the left. The same thing applies to squad. Peeking from the right side is better because you can engage your enemy with less of your body showing. It is very slight, but every advantage counts. This can also apply to CQB. If you're clearing rooms, you always want to clear using a right side peek to get as much advantage as possible. In squad, peeker's advantage exists, so the people who are spinning around a corner first will have the jump on the other, and using a right side peek will maximize this. Always peek to the right if you can help it. Something that helps with leaning is by offsetting your lean keys, by using the Q key on your keyboard to lean to the right and the E key to lean to the left. It will take some getting used to, but it is more ergonomic this way. When you're leaning to the right, you're usually moving to the right to peek. Using E to lean right, you either have to fat finger the D key to move to the right, or take another finger off of another key. If you swap your binds around, using Q to lean right, you have your pointer finger free to move right with the D key. Same thing applies to your ring finger when leaning left. Trust me, try it out and it'll make your leaning movement more fluid. A good rule of thumb when trying to peek somebody is if they already have a perfect angle and are holding it on you, do not try and peek them. You will die to them 9 times out of 10 unless they are just a really bad shooter and bad player. But if they're sitting there and holding that angle against you, there's no reason to try and peek it. Do something else, look at a different area, and maybe check back 15 seconds later and see if they're still holding it. In this clip, for example, I see somebody far off in the distance, and I see him holding behind the building, and I decide to just immediately go and peek without letting my stamina regain, and I obviously die. This is a bad example here. This is what you do not want to do. I should not have tried and re-peeked that guy. I should have just kept going along the building and gone around and maybe try and get a different angle on him. On to climbing animations. The first animation is just a step over. This is one of the fastest climbing animations you can get, and one of 2 in which you can still shoot while still climbing. The following is another fast animation. It is a one-handed vaulting animation. So you can notice this as your character will place his left arm onto the object to mantle. You are still able to shoot in this animation as well. The next one is a slow one-handed vault animation. This one is, well, slower, but also you're not able to shoot while doing the animation. For some objects, whenever your character would normally do the slow one-handed vault animation, you can slightly turn and turn it into a step over animation. That way you can still shoot while in the animation. And we would obviously like to be using the fastest animation possible. The last one is the two-handed climbing animation. This is a complete animation lock where you cannot move your character at all until the entire animation is completed. Avoid using this animation at all costs unless you absolutely have to. One climbing trick I would like to show you guys is sometimes there are these objects that are just above your helmet height that you can't seem to climb over. And if you were to walk straight up to them and jump, and it doesn't matter what you seem to do, you cannot climb onto it. And these can be fences or rooftops of buildings or just general walls. And the trick here is if you stand to the side of the object and kind of look up at a 45-degree angle, you are then able to grab onto it and mantle up on it. This is because a lot of the hitboxes in Squad are not perfect. So this sign, for example, is not a perfect circle. And if you can tell, you're grabbing onto seemingly nothing. And you can also stand pretty far off of the object before you actually fall. So this is the way that you can kind of, I don't know if you would say exploit or abuse, but use this as a way to mantle and get a break on an enemy when they think that you cannot actually mantle that wall or object. This is a perfect segue into using your environment and your area to your advantage. So for example, in this clip, an enemy logistics vehicle rolls up on me and my other two squad mates, and their SL and one other person gets out. And obviously they're trying to get down a rally or a radio here, and I do not have a good angle to shoot them from the top of this building. And so instead of just saying, hey, I can't shoot them, I can't shoot them, I can't see them, guess what? I use the ledge, get up on top of it, and now I have a great angle on them and I'm able to take both of them out before they're able to do something. Use every possible advantage up your sleeve to get the best angle and to take out your targets. Another way of getting an edge on your enemy is by knowing bandage times. If you are shot one time on an outer extremity, like your arm, hand, foot, or leg with 5.56 caliber, you have about 3.5 minutes to bleed out. 3.5 minutes is a long time in a gunfight. Don't believe me? Sit and stare at a wall for 3 minutes and 30 seconds and tell me how long that feels. If you're shot twice in your arm or leg with 5.56, you have around 1 minute and 45 seconds to bleed out. The rule of thumb I use is giving myself 1 minute and 30 seconds of time to be on the safe side, and that is plenty enough time to eliminate your enemy and get to a safe spot to bandage. So for the love of God, stop proning in the open when you get shot at. I mean, Jesus Christ, I hope you know how stupid you look and how easy of a kill you just gave the other person. If you're playing against me, I thank you for it because you just feed me free kills. But seriously, stop it. Keep running, or at least attempt to find the person shooting at you and shoot back. Bleeding can also be an advantage, believe it or not. If you're in CQB and you get shot, the enemy who shot you knows you're bleeding because of the red mist that comes off your character model. I would say around 95% of squad players bandage within 10 seconds of getting hit. Knowing this, you can pull out your bandage and go through the animation until it rips, so the enemy players hear it ripping and then immediately pull your gun out. Good players will hear that bandage being ripped open and immediately push you, and it'll be a free kill when they come spinning around that corner thinking you are defenseless. To prove a point, here's about 40 seconds of me just sitting still bleeding to give you a time frame of how long that feels. Feel free to skip it if you'd like. I've been talking about bandaging for about 2 minutes and 10 seconds, including that moment of silence we just took. So I hope that proves my point. But as well as bandage baits, you can also use nade baits because they make a sound whenever you pull the pin, and use that like you're about to throw a nade over the wall, and hopefully the enemy will come pushing around the corner. Because I know myself personally, if I hear an enemy on the other side of the wall and I hear them take out a nade, I'm immediately trying to spin around that corner and try and kill them because they'll be defenseless for about 2 to 3 seconds. When it comes to improving your aim, one of the first things I would recommend you get good at is hip firing. You should be comfortable hip firing to about 30 meters. Hip firing will bail you out of so many engagements whenever you and another enemy see each other at the same time. It will give you a time advantage to start shooting and suppress the enemy before they can get good sights on you and fire back. Most squad players don't hip fire after the ICO because it is much harder to do so, but you can still get good at it. Stamina management is one of the biggest factors when it comes to aiming and eliminating enemies. After the 8.2 update, you can accurately hit your shots after sprinting with 50% stamina. If you're in an area with enemies around you, you want to maintain at least 60 to 70% of your stamina. It'll be much more beneficial to be walking around with 60 to 70% stamina than sprinting with 30 to 40%. 1, because your ADS time will be quicker when you're walking, and 2, because after you drop below 50% stamina, your stability and aim will greatly suffer. The fastest way to regain stamina is by crouching. Some of you might be thinking it's proning, but if you want to regain your stamina quickly when moving around the map, prone is actually slower because it takes about 1.8 seconds to go through the standing up animation from prone. From 0 to 100 stamina, crouching is faster because you're able to move about 1 second sooner. And I know, 1 second, but still, it's quicker. Also, you can aim down your scope the entire time. Standing from prone is an animation that does not allow you to ADS. Now, how do you actually get better at shooting or aiming? The best way to better your aim is by playing. One great tool you can use is the Workshop Aim Training Map. You can download it by going to the Squad Workshop page and typing in Aim Training. From there, you can click the little green check mark and then launch Squad. From the main menu, go to a private Jensen's range. Using the tilde key to the left of your 1 key and above your tab key, type in admin change layer space aim training mod and hit enter. This map gives you every single faction, and each kit has every possible playable kit in one. This map has people running at different distances to practice leading your shots. It even has flick training that you can practice your follow-up shots, or use it for hip fire training, which is what I like to do with it. It even has 2 different CQB areas that you can play in, and they are pretty extensive. Be aware that sometimes the bots in there can be pretty cracked out, and if you die, it makes you restart from the beginning. It is great for practicing peeking and clearing rooms. The map even has grenade ranges where you can practice bouncing nades to a certain distance, and even different building areas to practice shooting out of or into certain building types. It even has an AT range to practice your lat and hat shots. This map is your best friend when trying to improve your aim. Spend 5 hours a week on this map practicing, or at the very least, before you go and play in a match, turn on some music and use it to warm up for 20 to 30 minutes. If you are serious about improving and use this map, after just a few weeks, I promise you will see your aim improve. I hope you guys are able to take something away from this video series. Please do not just watch this series once. I highly recommend that you watch it over because I threw a ton of information at you. Or try to implement a few things one at a time, then come back to learn more, and then add those concepts or movements to your arsenal. Just watching this video series once will not make you better. You actually have to try to apply these concepts and movements in your game. And if you do, I promise you will start seeing improvement. I put a lot of time and effort into this series, so if you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing. We're almost at 1 million. And again, thank you for watching. Happy grinding.